Hi, I'm Grady Killane in the CapeCod.com News Center, and welcome to Sunday Journal. I'm joined today by national best-selling author from the local area, Casey Sherman. Thanks so much for joining me for this conversation.
Yeah, no, it's great to be back, Grady. Always a pleasure chatting with you.
All right, awesome. So as well, we wanted to catch up with you because you're our eyes on the inside of Hollywood as we have some very, very important, very large strikes as of late involving the entertainment industry, which I believe also probably impacted your local production taking place in Provincetown. There's a series in production based on your latest book, Helltown, which is the story of Tony Costa, a serial murder case from the 1960s and 70s. So I wanted to catch up with you and ask a little bit more about basically what were you seeing? Were you, for example, allowed to speak with me up until now, or what was the deal? How does that impact you specifically in the production ongoing?
Yeah, I mean, I was free to speak with anybody, but I really had nothing to say during the strikes, especially on the production side. So there was a writer's strike and an actor's strike that took well over 100 days, two of the longest creative strikes in Hollywood history. And, finally the writer's strike was resolved in early September or late September. And then we had the actor's strike resolved as well. So the great news is everybody can get back to work. We're in pre-production on Helltown right now, and what that means is we're writing the scripts, noodling with the pilot episode as we speak, and very excited about moving forward with this project.
All right, that is awesome. Now, you came in before we had a conversation as well for Sunday Journal a few weeks ago at this point, and it seemed like everybody knew that the strikes were looming. So were people kind of like getting ready? Were there some extra, maybe a few overnight hours pulled or something to have some prototypes written up before the strike actually happened? What was it like in the leading up days?
Yeah, that's a great question. There was a lot of anxiety in Hollywood, and with my projects, we were trying to get as many episodes on the page as we could, or as many words on the page as we could with regard to the scripts, especially when it comes to Helltown. So we had an outline of what the pilot episode would look like, and then we had to literally drop our pens and wait for the strike to resolve. And our showrunner, Mohammed El Masri, who was one of the creative forces behind Apple TV's Severance, he could not write and move forward with the script as long as the strike was, ongoing. So the great thing is once the writer's strike was resolved, then Mohammed could, continue his work, and we could support him in any way that we could, and we did. And now we're, as I said, noodling our pilot script, and once we get an okay from Amazon Studio, then we can move forward with the other episodes. And I think this is going to be an 8-episode limited series on Amazon Prime. Hopefully we're going to be starting to shoot the series in 2024, probably late 2024 if we can fast track that. And we really want to shoot this series where this event took place, which is Provincetown, Massachusetts.
That would be awesome. I'm sure there's a lot of landmarks that people would be able to recognize in the show that you might not be able to recreate in other locations, especially with some of the ways the Cape is just so uniquely coastal in its focus.
Provincetown is a character of its own in the series, and I don't think you can duplicate it anywhere else. And we're going to do everything we can to film on location as best as we can. And the great thing about shooting now in Massachusetts, Grady, is you've got, very professional crews, working daily on big budget TV series and films, so we don't necessarily have to bring in too many experts or technical creative people from Hollywood. We have a great community to really draw from, and I'm sure our actors are going to be, a mix of, the A-list of Hollywood. We already have Oscar Isaac tapped to play Kurt Vonnegut, who is going to be investigating the serial murder case in our show, and we'll sprinkle in some local talent as well.
That is awesome. Now, I have so many questions related to the productions. Just before we move on too far from the writer's strike specifically, where did that leave you? You occupy a very interesting space as a writer. You're not necessarily involved in the Screenwriters Guild, or at least I don't think so. Do you mind elaborating a bit more on what you were seeing?
Actually.
Oh, okay.
So I'm
Carry
a
on.
member of not the Screen Actors Guild, but the WGA, which is the Writers Guild. And, I do work on screenplays, but I could not work on any of my screenplays while the strike was going on. But I had, fortunately for me, I leaned back on my primary vocation, which is writing books. So I was putting a book to bed called Murder in Hollywood, which will come out in February, and I'm now engaged with my 17th book, which is called Deadly Depths, and it chronicles a very tragic and wild story about Nathan Carman. Nathan Carman was a young man who took his mother out fishing in 2016 off the coast of Rhode Island, and she never came back. And the mystery is what happened to her. He was later charged with her murder and was supposed to go on trial this year in October, but he committed suicide in his jail cell during the summer. And prior to that incredibly dark episode, there was an unsolved murder of Nathan Carman's grandfather, who had left a $42 million family fortune behind. So I'm now, doing all the interviews, doing the writing, really gumshoeing this case as I do as an investigative journalist.
That is awesome. It's great that you're able to kind of rotate through the different hats, essentially. So when you're able to have it at one plate spinning, you can move on to the next one as well.
That's right.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I did want to ask you more about that project as well, but just to focus on Helltown for a little bit, where are we currently right now? So you're in talks with some of the team as well, some of the talent. Is that kind of handled by a separate team? Are you involved in the kind of talent seeking process? Are you focused mostly on cranking out those episodes? What is your role specifically in the production?
Yeah, I'm an executive producer on the project, and what it means is, I have a say in casting, and obviously I will contribute with the script writing as well, offering my insight as the writer of the primary source material, which was Helltown, the book. But when it comes to casting, the entire team, and I'm partnered with Team Downey, and that's Robert Downey Jr. and his wife Susan Downey's production company in Hollywood, and they've been incredibly collaborative, which is amazing. So we, over the past 2 years, once my book was originally published, we began working on, how do we translate, from the page to the screen? And what type of talent do we, go after to really bring this story to life? So one of the first actors that we really sought out was Oscar Isaac, a very talented Emmy Award winner and Oscar-nominated actor to play Kurt Vonnegut. And once we locked Oscar down, because he's a great actor, but he's also a fan of Vonnegut's, then we started to say, okay, well, who will helm this project? What type of director can we reach out to that might be interested in this journey with us? And we stumbled across a young director named Edward Berger. He's a German director, and he'd done some great work in Europe and was starting to really get his footing in Hollywood. And he was a sought-after director, and we had some collaborative conversations with him, and he was just a brilliant mind and a delight to work with. And as we were talking, he kept on mentioning a movie that he had just finished. Well, we found out that film was called All Quiet on the Western Front for Netflix, and it just so happens that film was nominated for 9 Oscars and won 4. So, we were very lucky to engage with Ed Berger, as he was ascending to his, current position as one of the most sought-after directors in Hollywood. And, we're only as good as the people that we surround ourselves with on this project. And thus far, we've surrounded ourselves with amazing talents, both in front of the camera and behind the camera.
Right, that is so awesome to be able to get all these different unique voices, especially some that are rising stars like that. Is there anything else that you're kind of looking forward to when it comes to the local area? I've been noticing a lot of films and shows have been shooting on Cape Cod and the islands as of late. We had The Perfect Couple shooting just a while back. That even had people protesting as well, part of it related to the strikes before, though they assert that it didn't actually cross the picket line at any point. But do you think that there's an untapped potential here on the Cape and Islands region, as well as Massachusetts in general, for Hollywood endeavors? Why is there such an uptick in entertainment industry as of late?
It's a great question, and I think that people love to shoot here. You get a lot of creative folks that came from Massachusetts or New England originally and understand the diverse topography. You can basically shoot any type of film here in Massachusetts or in New England. Because we have the coast, we have the mountains. You could even shoot a western in New England if you needed to. So I think that's what differentiates New England filmmaking from, say, Georgia or some of these other states where production companies are really, moving their productions and activities to. And I do think, so Massachusetts, we have another project that we're really excited about, and we're in the pitch stage of it now, which is an adaptation of my New York Times bestselling book 12, the Fight for Redemption of Tom Brady. And this was made a lot of news about a month ago when we announced it. So we are developing a limited series chronicling the 20-year dynasty of the New England Patriots, obviously here in Massachusetts. And we're very excited about that.
Very interesting. You definitely have a focus for some of the I guess, the myths and legends of the New England area. How did you fall into this role, essentially, chronicling the different cultural aspects and impacts that are related to the New England space? Were you just always interested from a young stage, or did this niche find you?
Well, a little of both, Grady, and that's a great question. I call myself the accidental author. I never believed that I'd be writing books or making films one day, but that is until I was thrust into the spotlight because of my work on one case, one of the biggest murder cases in American history, the case of the Boston Strangler. And as many in the audience know, my aunt, Mary Sullivan, a 1962 graduate of Barnstable High School, was the youngest and final victim in that notorious 1960s murder spree. And when I was at journalism school at Boston University back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, I began to reinvestigate that case based on my family's just suspicion that the truth had never been told back in the 1960s. And, that investigation led to my first book, A Rose for Mary, The Hunt for the Real Boston Strangler, which became a surprise bestseller because I'd never written a book before. And, now 17 books later, it's interesting that I continue to find amazing, heartfelt stories here in the New England area. As I tell people, you can throw a pebble in this region and find a great story. So there are still more stories to be told. And with the Patriot Way, which is our New England Patriots limited series, I am reconnecting with the writing team that worked on two of my other films, The Finest Hours and Patriots Day. Oscar-nominated screenwriters Paul Tamasy and Eric Johnson, who had also written The Fighter with Mark Wahlberg. So, we're, again, you surrounding yourself with amazing talent, you can do incredible things. And we're very excited to take a very independent view of this incredible sports dynasty, both on and off the field over 20 years, because, we're never going to see anything like it again. And we're going to be incredibly honest and tell the truth in this series.
Definitely a kind of changing moment, especially for this, the industry at large, essentially. Now, unfortunately, I do have to put you in the hot seat real quick, just because it's my job in life. But between working with Team Wahlberg and Team Downey, do you have a preference so far when it comes to some of the ease of working together for certain projects, or is it exciting to kind of be able to just rub elbows with these different celebrity artistic talents?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, and I would say we had some challenges on the Patriots Day set with some of the creative forces that we were working with every day and sometimes working against, because we had written the original book, Boston Strong, which became Patriots Day, and we wanted this story to be as authentic as possible because we owed it to the survivor community, many of whom are still our close friends today. The Hollywood folks could go back to Hollywood, but if the film, wasn't well received, we would hear about it at Dunkin' Donuts or, our local watering hole. So we would own that. We knew we'd own that film, for the rest of our lives. And, I go back and forth on that film. It's the 10th year anniversary of the Boston Marathon bombing. So I've had to revisit that film for charity events for different survivors of the marathon bombings, and I've rewatched it. I think it's a good film. I think it does stand up. But again, your previous question with regard to working with folks like Wahlberg as opposed to Team Downey. I mean, I would say that there's probably no better collaborative team than Team Downey. I'm really fortunate to be working with them, and hopefully, we'll have a few other projects that we can collaborate on in the future.
Now, I did also want to ask you, we have this ongoing project related to Helltown as well. You just mentioned that you've got two plates spinning as well with this new book. Essentially, my next question is, when do you find time to sleep? Have you mastered the art of the cat nap, or is this some other...
I hang upside down on a tree branch like a bat for a couple hours or a possum and get back to work. I do it because I love it, Grady. And then waking up every day and with the opportunity and the ability to create something, there's no greater high in my mind, and it drives me to continue to tell these great stories. This book I have coming out in February is called A Murder in Hollywood, and that's a re-examination of a notorious murder that took place in 1958 in Hollywood involving screen star Lana Turner, who allegedly had killed her gangster boyfriend on the bedroom floor of her Beverly Hills mansion. And Lana had been looked at over the past 60 years as a femme fatale in Hollywood and by historians alike. But when I re-examined this story and really dug deep into it, it was an opportunity for me to, provide Lana agency and allow her to get her power back. She wasn't a villainess. She was actually a hero and a feminist icon well before any other feminist icons, especially in Hollywood, had emerged.
What is the comparison between kind of investigating these older, more historical focused, these cultural impact things from decades ago versus stuff like Carmen's situation, which was really just a few years ago at this point? Going back and forth between those two projects, how do you feel?
Well, that's a great question. With the Lana Turner case, obviously I was dependent on primary source documents from the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. There were a lot of people that weren't still around that remembered that notorious crime, so I had to really drill down on documentation. Whereas Nathan Carmen, it really is all about, interviewing as many witnesses as I can, because a lot of the case files are still impounded in that case, despite the fact that he committed suicide in the summer and the case is, officially, so to speak, been closed. But that's really where, I'm allowed to really flex my journalistic muscles really on both sides, chasing after the documents and also chasing after the witnesses. And, that's where my training as a journalist, I was a TV producer at WBZ TV for almost 20 years. And, my background as a journalist taught me the who, what, where, when, and how to get these stories. So, putting that hat on and chasing after these big stories is what I do.
Cue me. I'm sure the audience can hear me furiously taking notes as we go through this conversation. But the Nathan Carmen, is that the fastest, the equivalent of the fastest turnaround that you've ever had before? Is this is this the most recent murder case that you've been investigating in terms of how long has passed since the incident occurred and when you are writing about it?
Yeah, I would say the project that I'd done prior with regard to the Boston Marathon bombings was probably the quickest turnaround because, the smoke had still, had not dissipated on Boylston Street when myself and my writing partner, Dave Wedge, on that project got to work on it. And again, we were almost forced into writing this story because we got a lot of criticism. It's too early to tell that story. And for some people it was. But I had to go back and say, well, it's never too early to tell a story about heroism and courage under fire, and really leaning into the ordinary folks that broke down the barricades on Boylston Street for one purpose, which was to save lives. I said we always should be willing to tell those types of stories. So Dave Wedge and I, for the next year, spent time interviewing everybody we could connected to the case, from law enforcement, from the first responders, and most importantly, the survivors. We spent 13 days on a cruise ship in the south of France with 100 survivors of the Boston Marathon bombings, getting their stories, chronicled for this book. So that was an incredibly emotional and quick turnaround. The Nathan Carman case, his mother went missing in 2016. There has been a few years separated between what I'm doing and what happened then. But it's still, to your point, Grady, it's chasing after as many documents and as many witnesses as you can to tell a fully comprehensive story. And that's ultimately my goal every time I sit down to write.
I also wanted to talk about your play production that you've been doing. Finding Whitey has been moved into an on-theater production, and I wanted to ask a little bit more about how that went and if there's any kind of future plans involving that.
A great question, Grady, and that was a byproduct of the writer and actor strikes. Knowing that we would not be able to tell the Whitey Bulger story on the small screen or the big screen anytime soon, we decided to adapt our book Hunting Whitey into a 3-act stage play, which we did. And I leaned into my childhood friendship with another Barnstable High School graduate, Neil McDonough, and asked him to play Whitey Bulger on stage, and he did, and really kind of owned that role. So, based on the success of a sold-out performance, in Boston back in May, we're going to be building the production out and taking it on the road, hopefully one day to Broadway, to the West End of London, and around the country, because it is an interesting story, because really Whitey Bulger is the last so-called gangster in American history after John Gotti. So there's still a lot of interest in people like that.
Yeah, it's a very unique kind of culture. The death of a cultural icon, in a way. The gangster now is just a fictional trope as opposed to what he used to be, which is an actual real-life threat.
That's correct, and in our play and in our book, we deconstructed the mythology around Bulger. He's not a hero in our eyes, and we show you how he built his own myth, and then how it was destroyed around him. From the FBI agents that eventually captured him to the families of the victims that he without mercy put in the ground.
All right. Well, good luck in that endeavor. Very interesting to be diving out into different branches of media as well, between TV, books, and now as well stage production. Sounds like there's a lot of different variety that you've got going on. And as well, we wanted to talk more about Helltown, just kind of the last bits, the timeline. Essentially, you already mentioned 2024 is the goal, but how long does it really take to get this from the page onto TV screens in front of people's eyes? I assume it's going to be maybe another couple of years, or do you think once that 2024 hits and you get the filming underway, can we expect kind of a fast turnaround?
Well, I would love that, and I hope that we can all be watching the series in 2025. It's definitely going to take the next year to finish all the scripts and hopefully get into production. And then, there's 1,000 other things that have to happen before it gets slated for broadcast or for streaming. So, some movies and films, take 2 years to really kind of wrap up. Some may take 10, depending on, things that occur in the production that you don't foresee. I hope, and I'm knocking on wood right now, that we can bring this limited series, to everybody's living room in 2025. That's the goal. But it also depends on, schedules of actors and directors and site surveys on locations. It really does take an army to make a TV series or a film. So everything has to break right for it to happen. When people ask me, well, did you like this movie or that movie? I look at every movie as a success because, 1,000 things have to go right for that movie to even be made. So I'm always in awe of any film that reaches the final stage of production and gets out into the world.
Have you reached out to the town of Provincetown? Have they been kind of talking with you guys about how this works? What is the process of essentially getting permission to film in a town? Can you elaborate more for us?
Yeah, sure. And we have not reached out to the town of Provincetown yet because it's too early, in our pre-production. We'll get to that point. But we do know that, Provincetown has opened its arms for other productions, whether it's American Horror Story or another TV series that was filmed there a couple of years ago. So we know that, they're amenable to film and television production crews filming on location, even, despite the subject matter. So we hope to partner with the town of Provincetown because it does bring in, there's a lot of, brings in a lot of creativity to the town, brings in a lot of, financial resources to not only Provincetown but to Cape Cod. When I made the finest hours, I was surprised at all of the, local businesses that benefited from just us shooting on location on Cape Cod.
All right, that is awesome. Yeah, I mean, slowly Cape Cod is just going to be able to get its voice and its image out there a little bit further with every production that comes by. All right, we're about coming up on time, unfortunately, but is there anything else you wanted to highlight for our listeners about ongoing productions, excitement, some things that you wanted to touch on that we didn't get the chance to talk about just yet? Just anything for our listeners?
Yeah, I would just say that, hopefully you can pick up my next book, A Murder in Hollywood, which will be published on February 13th, 2024, and available in bookstores all around the Cape and worldwide.
All right, awesome, Casey. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Grady. Appreciate it.
I'm Grady Gillane in the CapeCod.com News Center, and thank you for listening to Sunday Journal.